the challenges I think with some of the diabetes education programs is that very geared towards people that are on medication. At that time, they were teaching from Canada Health Guide, which was pretty outdated. Teaching people to eat 5-6 times a day. The thing that I thought was most backwards, though, was you would measure the amount of carbohydrate you're eating and then calculate how much insulin you were going to take. And that's kind of an interesting one, right? Because you stop and you think about it, and it's like, but do I need to eat that carbohydrate? Is there any downside in terms of taking insulin? And I think that's kind of has been the blind spot kind of in the traditional education approach. It's been very much geared around glycemic control and using medications for glycemic control. And really kind of this big, I think the thing that was really missing from that was you can do a lot more by changing the nutrient pattern.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. I'm so excited to have Brendan Byrne, Dr. Brendan Byrne, MD, on our show today, because Dr. Byrne is revolutionary in what he does. Like, he went to med school, he did all of this incredible studying, like thousands of other doctors do across the globe, but he's taken it a step further and he built the Wellness Garage. And that is what today's podcast is here to share with you. All about the Wellness Garage that's in beautiful British Columbia, Canada. And the Wellness Garage is known for many things. Working with patients to reverse type 2 diabetes. Yes, type 2 diabetes can be reversed. And so definitely, if you have type 2 diabetes, you can work with us, but definitely, please reach out to Dr. Brendan Byrne and you can work with his team at the Wellness Garage. Another thing that they help you do is they just help you build better habits around nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress tolerance, relationships, and finding your purpose in life. Like, what MDs do you go see when you go see your GP? Do they ask you about your purpose? Do you feel like you're living your purpose? Do you feel like you are sleeping well? How do you tolerate stress? And we know that when you eat better, you sleep better. When you sleep better, you love better. When you love better, you are more resilient to all the stressors in life. And your whole entire life just improves. It keeps getting better and better and better. So at the Wellness Garage, you are not just going for a 7.5-minute appointment. You are going to get a full transformation health makeover in all areas of your life. You also will learn how to take control of your health so that you never have to hand that control over to somebody else who's going to say that you have to live with that chronic disease for the rest of your life. This is your diagnosis. You're going to be on meds for life. Sorry, this is just all part of getting older. All the silly excuses that so many doctors tell their patients that are simply not true. Another thing that I love about the Wellness Garage is they work on sustainable weight management, which means that you get to lose the weight and actually keep it off versus so many fad diets out there. You actually gain more of the weight back within 12 months of doing the cleanse or the diet. Now, relieving osteoarthritis is another thing that the Wellness Garage is known for. And their other program that they offer, which I just think is amazing. And thank you for doing this, Brendan Byrne at the Wellness Garage. But it is helping RCMP officers and members help with weight loss, with nutrition, with fitness, with lifestyle optimization, with reducing blood pressure and cholesterol, reversing heart disease, all of those wonderful things. And that's a year-long multidisciplinary program. So as you can see, this is why we have Dr. Brendan Byrne, MD, on our show today to share all of these beautiful things. I am going to leave it up to the podcast itself to share with you everything that you need to know. Before we jump in, I just want to let you know that we are going to be launching another Get Off Your Fat ass program. That's going to be launching in October because the last program was such a hit. It was so much fun to teach. We had so many incredible transformations that took place from all the people who were part of the program. And just so you know, when we talk about your fat ass and getting off your fat ass, what we mean is that you are fabulous, you are amazing, you are authentically you, and you have the power to transform your life. So it's FAAT. And it was just an exciting program to teach. So definitely look out on our social media, our emails, our websites to know about that. So you can sign up, learn how to set a BHAG, learn how to eat better, how to sleep better, how to poop better, how to get your menstruation, issues under control so you don't have to suffer from PMS, and then how to go out there and achieve your goals, how to go out there and start running and biking and doing all the activities that you have not been doing because you know what, you're just so lethargic or maybe in pain or you just can't get started. And this is what this is what Get Off Your Fat Ass is about. It's about getting you motivated and actually eating better, actually moving your body so that you can realize that amazing person that you already are. So hook up with us so that you know when we're going to be launching that next program. And let's dive into this podcast. And you also know what to do. Please share this show with everyone and anyone that you know can benefit from the amazing work that Dr. Brendan Byrne is doing at the Wellness Garage. See you at the end. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Eat Real to Heal podcast. Really excited today to have Dr. Brendan Byrne on our show as he is going to fill you up with a wealth of knowledge all about reversing metabolic diseases, particularly diabetes and more. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Dr. Brendan Byrne, to the Eat Real to Heal show.
Welcome. It's nice to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, definitely myself as well. So you are a medical practitioner. You studied medicine at McGill, is that correct?
Yeah, back in the day.
Back in the day, sciences and at Yale University?
Yes.
Yeah, nice. And, when you were in medical school, did you ever imagine that you'd be here today where you are doing the work you're doing at the Wellness Garage?
No, I can't say that this is what I set out to do. And in fact, my career has been a little bit different than most in that shortly after finishing my training and going out to practice, I went down a whole detour around electronic medical records, started a company, built a company, became an executive at a telco after selling my company. Became a chief innovation officer, and finally, kind of in 2017, really kind of 17 years after starting practice, came back to practice, and I was very fortunate because I had options, and so I had lots of work that I was doing in digital health, but I really wanted to get back to medicine. And I thought, well, what type of practice would I set up if I had a choice? Because I did have that choice, and I looked at it, and I felt very strongly that we needed to do something different in primary care and something more upstream, where the root causes for many chronic diseases lie, and that's really in lifestyle. And so we opened Wellness Garage back in, 3 years ago now, in April 2018. And when you walk into our clinic, it's a big gym space, and there's a plant-based cafe up front, and meditation room in the back, and then tucked away in a corner is a single exam room that looks like a typical doctor's office. So everything else is really built around the lifestyles, and that was just really our big insight was, let's do what we can do at the lifestyle behavior level to really get at that root cause and try to prevent disease. And as I got more and more into it, realizing reverse disease, that was on the table, and so that's what we've been doing.
That's incredible. And, as you're telling your story, I can see the progression happening, but I imagine, was there a pivotal moment for you where you just knew that you wanted to do things differently? Like, was there a particular story or documentary or book or, what was the turning point for you?
So one of the turning points for me was back when I ran my EMR company, I always practiced a day a week at a local clinic. And so I kept my hand in, kept my license going, tried to keep current. But in that context, I would see people just, 10-minute visits as is pretty common in primary care. And I remember seeing somebody, I think she was like a 58-year-old woman. And I remember she was on 12 medications. She was diabetic. She was measuring her sugars a few times a day. When I saw her results weren't great, and really kind of she was really just getting worse, right? And she was doing everything we asked. She was taking 12 medications a day. She was measuring her blood sugars 2 to 3 times a day. She was showing up for her doctor's appointments, but clearly this wasn't helping her, right? And so I looked at her and I was, talked to her a little bit around the nutrition part, and she had gone and done the diabetes education at the local hospital, but it didn't make a lot of sense to her, and she didn't really know how to apply that. And she had a sore knee, so she couldn't exercise, and she wasn't sleeping very well. It just kind of across the board, she needed more help. And I remember thinking, she needs like a pit crew. She needs, she needs an exercise physiologist. She needs a nutritionist or a dietitian. She needs a physician who can spend time with her. Yet I have 10 minutes, and really all I can do is increase the dosage of her insulin to try and control her blood sugars better. So that particular visit really stuck with me, that this was the wrong direction. And in that context, I felt very powerless, right? Because I didn't have all those resources available to me. And that wasn't, how it was going to work. And I'm not going to get paid to spend an hour with her. And even if I spend an hour with her, it's not going to move, I'm not going to be able to change things. So that was kind of one of the inputs for what we were doing here. The other input was I'd spent 2 to 3 years being the chief innovation officer at TELUS Health, and I spent a lot of time kind of going out on the edge and seeing kind of what new technologies are coming to health, where we can go with precision health and personalized medicine and genomics and microbiome, and I was just really eager to say, can we apply that to what we're doing? And so really when we opened Wellness Garage, my wife, who's my co-founder, and psychologist and clinical counselor, we really thought, we were going to use precision tools, but we were going to use them upstream around lifestyle behaviors. And that was kind of the vision for it. We didn't have a business model, so we hadn't figured that part out. We really just had kind of this desire to do it. And that's been the journey that we've been on for the last 3 years.
So I love that I have a lot more questions just around that too, just with that particular individual. And I'm going to come back to that. But let's just talk about your time at TELUS Health. And it's a question we get asked a lot because we're doing this big tour across Canada next year, which we had to postpone because of COVID. Doing a small tour around BC as long as the restriction lifts. So we've been talking to a lot of sponsors, and every single person is like, contact TELUS Health, for sponsorship. But then the second question is like, why does TELUS have TELUS Health? Could you just explain that a little bit more? Like, what is the motivation for such a big telecommunications company to be in the health sector?
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, it was funny. I was at TELUS when my 25th med school reunion came up, and I remember kind of a friend talking to me about it, and like, who would have thought that you would, when I graduated from medical school back in 1990, who would have thought that you'd work, for the phone company, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, so it's a pretty good question. But if you think about it from the perspective of what TELUS essentially does, or what a telco does, is basically move information across time and distance and do it securely. And you look at kind of what we're doing in health, and it's all about the information. Increasingly, it's about information that patients are generating, and so it's moving that information and connecting parts of the healthcare system. So that's really, I think, the impetus for it. Yeah, the vision to bring kind of 21st century technology to medicine and create those connections is really the drive for it. And the challenge is healthcare is it's a hard space to change. It's a hard space to put technology into. And so that's been the challenge along with it. But I think the promise of it has just been, can we connect people? Can we help the information move more quickly? Can we put that information, that data to use in such a way that helps people, helps practitioners derive more insights? So that's really where TELUS came into this.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously doing it in a very secure way, because there's always so many breach. Anytime we put anything digitally, then there's always the risk of that. So yeah, having obviously like one of the best telecommunications company manage that is probably the right thing to do. Thanks for bringing insight into that, because I've been curious about it as well. Now let's go back to this, 50-plus-year-old woman who, when you mentioned the nutrition part, now when you were, trying to talk to her about nutrition and knowing that she had taken the diabetes nutrition program that's offered, was your vision of nutrition, your understanding and knowledge and science the same as what she had learned? Or had you already arrived in this space where you kind of understood that nutrition is a little bit different than what is the standard, within the standard education programs? And in Canada, a little bit different than the States, but sometimes not too much. Like I often see on the diabetes websites, they're like beef stroganoff and, a lot of, still tons of refined foods, lots of fats, lots of oils and sugars, and, and often the wrong messaging around food that is often, I find, not as based in biochemistry as it could be. And mostly often based on macronutrients versus micronutrients. So I'm curious if what is it that you would have wanted to teach this woman? Did you teach this woman?
Yeah, and I think, to be fair, I probably know a whole lot more now than I did at that point in time. But the challenges, I think, with some of the diabetes education programs is that very, very geared towards people that are on medication. At that time, they were teaching from Canada Health Guide, which was pretty outdated. Teaching people to eat 5-6 times a day. The thing that I thought was most backwards, though, was you would measure the amount of carbohydrate you're eating and then calculate how much insulin you were going to take. And that's kind of an interesting one, right? Because you stop and you think about it, and it's like, but do I need to eat that carbohydrate? And is there any downside in terms of taking insulin? And I think that's kind of has been the blind spot kind of in the traditional education approach. It's been very much geared around glycemic control and using medications for glycemic control. And really kind of this big, I think the thing that was really missing from that was you can do a lot more by changing the nutrient pattern. And I think, where I first really kind of dove into this was starting to look at the low carb movement and what people were doing with low carb and ketogenic diets and how that was working for people and what made sense there. And I came to that world on the background of, being, pescatarian for 30 years and believing in kind of whole food approaches. and probably much more aligned from a probably an ethical and environmental standpoint with plant-based medicine. But the low carb movement, ketogenic movement, really had some, like, there was a lot that made sense from the standpoint in terms of, if you reduce the amount of carbohydrate in the diet, you reduce the amount of insulin that your body needs to generate to store that carbohydrate. So that part was pretty straightforward. What I subsequently found over the years has just been, and it's interesting because if you spend any time on Twitter, it's very very tribal. You've got kind of your low carb keto zealots, and you've got your plant-based zealots, and they don't see the world the same. They don't see the same world, that's for sure.
No.
But if you're a practical person just trying to help somebody in your exam room, you really do see the common ground, and the common ground actually comes back to, it's really about the ultra processed foods that people are eating. It's very, very rare that I'm worried about the carbohydrate in a chickpea for a person with diabetes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's often like, okay, there's a lot of sugar, and there's a lot of flour, and there's a lot of refined carbohydrates ahead of that chickpea carb that I'm worried about. And so, our approach really, actually, just took off from that, which was, if we can help people just start to eat whole foods and learn how to make whole foods. And as you do that, what you start doing is you tend to start nudging, you'll nudge people a little bit towards more, eating more plants and making sure that they're getting more veg, making sure they're getting the benefits of fiber, and reducing those refined carbohydrates. That's kind of been the biggest part of our approach. What we've seen kind of in the blind spots that we saw in the low carb approach was, you could definitely eat low carb and eat really healthy, right? So there's no question you can kind of do everything really well, and you can do it plant-based as well. There's no, it's just harder, but people can do that. But often that wasn't what people were doing, right? So people come in going, I'm doing keto, and I'm going to Wendy's, and I'm getting lettuce instead of the bun, and so I'm not eating very high quality food, and really, as you start to peel that back, the blind spot I find from the low carb movement has really just been, are you getting enough fiber, and are you benefiting from all the things that fiber can do in terms of helping your metabolic health? And so that's, often when I'm working with people that that's the way they want to eat, it's really just trying to help them make sure they don't have a blind spot to it. The flip side of it on the plant-based side is often because we're defining it by the fact that we're not eating meat, and we're eating, and so it's a bit weird. Sometimes you see people, and and maybe they're coming at it from an ethical and environmental perspective, and it's, I'm not eating meat, but sometimes there's fillers within the diet of a lot of refined carbohydrates and a lot of processed foods that really are not helping. And so I found kind of over the years, I've been in low carb kind of groups with physicians where I'm the only one that seems to be worried about fiber and kind of nutritional quality. And I've been in plant-based groups where, it's only about, the purity of whether it's plant-based. And I find myself a little bit like stuck between the two groups. And but there's now, you're starting to see people going, hang on a second, there's a lot of common ground here. And maybe if we actually just focus on eating whole foods and high quality foods and thinking about where our food comes from, then we can do a lot better here. And that's the message that I think works with people, right? Like it's, if you just nudge people that direction, it really makes a big difference.
Yeah, no. And I like what you said about, I find with my clients, my clients come to and they've hit their rock bottom, or what they think their rock bottom is, often it means like they're going to be put on a drug, or they've been on their drugs for so long, and that, disease is still progressed, and now it's leading to surgery. And, they often are afraid of the surgery, especially when it comes to diabetes. We're talking about things like blindness and amputations. And a lot of my clients have cancer and autoimmune diseases that are very advanced. And so for them, they're just like, tell me how to do it. And I always find it's really easy. I'm like, we're going to put you fully on plant-based whole food. It's, when you go grocery shopping, you go in the store, if it has more than one ingredient, then just don't buy it. And then, that seems to be the most helpful for them, because they're like, well, I can only buy potatoes and yams and squash and broccoli and cauliflower and things like this. I'm like, yeah, just do that. And so it tends to be pretty cut and dry for them. Like when you do when it's, fully whole foods, plant-based, or even if they were to add, if they are pescatarian, if they want to have, some, animal-based product. But in most cases, what they find is by eating the whole food, they're so satiated and their cravings are gone, and, they feel so good and they have energy. And then all of a sudden it's pretty quick. But it's been interesting because over the, 15 years that I've been doing this, a lot of my clients have said, like, why didn't my doctor just tell me that? And so I'm always curious when I meet a physician like yourself that managed to navigate your way into this world and figure out a way to work with patients. But you've set up a very different model than, if we have physicians listening to this right now, I can imagine what they're saying. Like, there's no way that I can teach patients to do this. We still only have 7.5-minute appointments, 10-minute appointments.
Right.
So tell me about your model, because I'm sure there's going to be physicians that are really curious about this. Like, how does this model work financially for the patient? How does it work financially for you, that you could be successful as a physician and help people, but be able to give them the time that they need? So can you
Right.
describe that model a bit more?
So we've done a couple of things. One is we've tried to set ourselves up as a resource for other physicians. So we don't do primary care. So we don't take on the primary care. We will see people. Other physicians will refer their patients to us for lifestyle medicine consults, and we will evaluate. We'll essentially evaluate kind of how they're doing. So we've developed something called the wellness quotient, which asks about 130 different questions and scores them and gives you scores across behaviors, kind of across the key 6 pillars of behavior, as well as scoring you across a number of different symptom categories. So it gives you it helps us understand kind of what a person's doing, their behaviors, and how they're feeling, their symptoms, in a very standardized way so that we can compare over time. We do a bunch of blood work and biomarkers to look at metabolic health and to look at kind of all aspects of health, and then we put all of that together. And so we put that together in a lifestyle medicine assessment that really formats that information in such a way that they're able to make the connection between kind of what they're doing and their behaviors, how they're feeling on their symptoms, what their biomarkers are showing, and then we land on kind of an action plan of what kind of changes can you make. What are the things that you could take that will improve things. And so we really start from that kind of perspective of trying to understand where exactly somebody is across their whole health, and then guiding them in terms of what they're currently doing, and guiding them towards better. We tend not to be super prescriptive, so we tend not to be, thou must do it this way. We try to work with people kind of where they are. We like to build off of strengths. So when they have really good strengths, it's like, okay, great, let's do that. Let's extend that. So we do these assessments. We do them kind of get referrals to do them, and we've streamlined the process and our informatics so that we can deliver this comprehensive report within the constraints of the time that's involved. So one of the concepts that we've really been working on, actually, I mean, it's probably been a COVID thing that really pushed us, is we had to do all this virtual care, and it was this flip the exam room. So in education, teachers have realized, it makes no sense to spend 40 minutes delivering a lecture, send the kids home to do homework on their own, where they're going to have all the questions. So why not send them home with a 40-minute video that they watch, bring them into the classroom to do the homework where they can ask questions, right? Like,
Totally. Yeah.
totally makes sense, especially with the fact that we all have devices that we can watch videos on. So one of the things that we've done with our assessments is we've flipped it. You fill out the wellness quotient. We've got the lab data. We put all that together. Our first visit, I've got all the data. I've got everything. That's kind of I'm going to measure. My first visit is kind of getting to know you, and what makes you tick. And what's important to you, and kind of those pieces that are harder to kind of put in a standardized questionnaire. So getting figuring out the person behind the data, and then what I do is I actually send that report to you, and it's a 13-page detailed report with little links that you can watch videos and kind of download kind of materials from. It's kind of like a self-guided journey through your health. And then the next visit is, okay, let's answer questions, right? Like, what questions do you have? And so really trying to maximize the time that we have together so that it's interactive and there's a dialogue, and it's human time. And then trying to take everything else and just kind of automate it in such a way that, if you don't need to have me try to cram a 20-minute explanation of insulin resistance into 5 minutes. Just watch the video and then come back and we can talk about it. So that's kind of been one of the concepts that has allowed us to do this. The other thing that we've done is we've really kind of taken off with group medical visits. So we'll have people, and these are funded by, they're funded in BC by MSP. So people will come in and again, they're delivered now with COVID, they're delivered via Zoom. So we'll get 25 people at all varying stages of diabetes, learning about insulin resistance and diabetes reversal, all in that session. And so that's great because you can explain stuff, and then somebody will ask a question. Somebody will invariably ask the question that everybody wants to ask, right?
Yeah.
And people learn that way. And then as these groups go on, people start to, like in a few weeks, people are realizing that they're losing weight, they're feeling better, they're got more energy, and their glucose is coming under control. And so they start to find their path within that. So that's been kind of the medical side. We've actually been able to try to keep it within the medical system, and even within the time constraints of what you get paid as a primary care doctor to do those things. We've built a bunch of supports around it, though. So we have an exercise physiologist, a couple of nutritionists, a dietitian, clinical counselor. So those parts are not covered by MSP because they're not funded that way, and people who need extra support pay for that extra support. But our philosophy has been, the information we share. And so if you go on our website, there's just a ton of information that we share, and we've got guides that, in fact, some of my colleagues will use these guides. Like, we've got an Eat Better guide, which is like 34-page guide on eating, and just kind of how to think about nutrition. That will be, my colleagues will send patients to just download that and have a look at that. So again, kind of resource to the community. So we really believe the information is free. We didn't invent the science. It's not like, I'm not sitting in a lab figuring this out. I'm just taking and synthesizing other people's work. So we want to share that. And really kind of what the people will pay for is support. And it's okay. Some people can take the information and run with it. Other people need a lot of support to actually apply it to their own lives. And so those programs, we built a variety of programs that, have that whole team. So back to that kind of person in the exam room, really what we're now done is we've built that pit crew. And so that person, if they came into the garage, we'd be able to help them. And so we'd be able to, work with them and understand why their knee was hurting and give them some exercises that can improve their pain and function with osteoarthritis. We can work with them, one-on-one around their nutrition and try to understand kind of, is it a knowledge gap? Is it a skill gap? Is it an environment issue? What's getting in the way of them, eating in a healthy pattern. And then we can give them, the framework of our 4+2 strategy around diabetes reversal, but give them that in the context of their own data, so they actually know exactly where I am on that pathway, and what I need to do to improve and reverse.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love this model. And yeah, the flip the exam room is brilliant. And there's a lot of similarities in the way we work. We work one-on-one or in groups or retreat settings, and it's the same thing. I tend to find the retreat settings are the best because we're together for 3 days, and everybody gets to get their hand into the foods and chop food and vegetables. And a lot of people don't even know what they're chopping and what they're, preparing, because I've never actually even seen a whole food before. And it's, it always surprises me, but, we're just like, okay, like this is a potato. This is what it looks like when it's not a French fry or when it's not, potato flour, especially for a lot of, there's a lot of vegans, vegetarians, plant-based whole foodists that think that potato flour is okay versus eating the whole potato or the whole yam or whatever it is.
Right.
And yeah, group setting, I think that is definitely the golden ticket for a lot of people because of that community that gets developed. Like I know when our clients leave, like they communicate with each other afterwards. So they not only have our support ongoing, but they have each other, and they, get together and they inspire each other with like recipes. And, humans are naturally competitive too. And, but also naturally want to be in community. So it kind of works really well. There's the part that I love is that you are working in diabetes reversal,
Mhm.
and MSP pays for it. And just recently, the Public Health Agency of Canada, that's holding $22 million for diabetes management in Canada, they said they will not fund anything that says disease reversal. So how did this happen to come around that MSP will pay for you to do this work when the Public Health Agency of Canada is like, can't reverse diabetes and we're not going to fund anything that says it will? So I'm curious
Yeah,
about this.
I mean, I think we're in a moment of time where that's shifting, right? So, Diabetes Canada just recently ran a a a conference around diabetes remission and diabetes reversal. Even a year ago, they wouldn't have considered that, and certainly 2 or 3 years ago, they would have said it's not really possible. Um, and all of this is just catching up, right? It's just catching up with where, I mean, it's actually catching up where a lot of people have been, patients, right? People have taken control of this and reversed their diabetes on their own. And I think one of the wonderful things, there's lots that we don't like social media for, but one of the wonderful things is seeing people's inspirational kind of stories. And I don't care whether somebody's done it with keto or plant-based or whatever. If they've lost 100 pounds and gotten off insulin and all medications and reversed their numbers, it's a triumph, and it shows you it's possible. Our work is largely based on Roy Taylor's work in the UK, and so Taylor and his group just a tour de force work over about 10 years, a couple of big studies, Counterpoint, Counterbalance, and then the direct study. They started really from the observation that we know that you can reverse type 2 diabetes because we've done it for a long time in bariatric surgery, right? So, gastric bypass, the first study that came out of this is 1992. So just like when I was just barely out of med school, the first study came out, and it was showing 10-year remission rate of 90% for people with bariatric surgery. And I think now, different techniques and so on and so forth, but people landed, it's probably 60 or 70% of people, of diabetics that do bariatric surgery will actually reverse their diabetes and put it into remission. So we know that you can do that, right? So then the question is there something special about it being bariatric versus other ways of losing the weight? And Taylor's work was just brilliant because he showed no, it's all about the weight. And so really, what you need to do is if you can get the weight away, and specifically what's happening is there's fat in the liver driving the insulin resistance process, and there's a little bit of fat in the pancreas that is often disrupting and the beta cells. If you can get rid of that fat, the beta cells will redifferentiate back and be able to secrete insulin again. And if you can get rid of the fat in the liver, you'll see the insulin sensitivity returns to the liver, and the insulin resistance goes away. And in their primary care study, the direct study, they showed 86% remission in people who were diagnosed of diabetes within 4 years, not on insulin. So they were taking people that were certainly diabetic, but not longstanding diabetics and not on insulin yet. But they saw this 86% remission when there was a weight loss of around 15 kilograms. Yeah. And so that really points the direction in terms of, that there's if you can get rid of the weight, you're going to do it. We've kind of stepped into that and looked at it and said, well, let's look at all the components from a lifestyle perspective, and and taking kind of cues from the low carb group. Let's pay attention to the glycemic load of the food you're eating, because there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction in terms of how much insulin you need. So the goal is to bring down insulin levels in order to reverse this process. So let's pay attention to that, and let's eat in such a way that we don't, that will lower our insulin levels. Let's make sure there's enough fiber in what you're eating. So really all we're saying is let's get rid of those fast carbs, those refined carbs. Let's make sure they're coming from whole foods. Let's make sure they're coming with fiber. And let's make sure that, each meal's got enough protein to drive satiation, and enough fiber, and, enough veg there. And really, being on the fat side, let's not worry about the fat, but let's make healthy choices around the types of fat and use that from a satiation factor. So often kind of, we end up really kind of coaching people around that first part of eating to lower insulin. And then the second, thing that we really landed on as well is, if you think about it, when you eat and you eat carbohydrate, and generate that insulin response, 80 to 90% of that will go into the muscles. Your muscles are this great sponge for the carbohydrate that you eat. In insulin resistance, what happens, either through kind of being sedentary, or through kind of advanced insulin resistance, the muscles just don't take up the glucose, and so you deliver more glucose to the liver, and glucose, extra glucose in the liver becomes fat, and it drives it leads to more fat in the liver, which makes the insulin resistance worse. So really kind of making sure people are active and using their muscles and are able to take advantage of the fact that their muscles can be a big sponge and kind of absorb that, any carbohydrate in the diet. That's kind of the second part of our strategy. The third part of our strategy is recognizing that if the liver is central to the insulin resistance process, then we got to make sure we're not throwing fuel on the fire. So if people are still eating things, with high concentrations of fructose, really from sugar, especially in drinks, that's just going to go to the liver and get turned into fat. So we've got to stop that. Alcohol, same thing, right? If we're drinking alcohol, that alcohol is going to get turned into fat in the liver. And then the third one around kind of liver health ends up being back to gut health, because if you're having a lot of gut symptoms, the inflammation from your gut, where does the blood from the gut go? Directly to the liver. So you're going to get inflammation in the liver. Inflammation in the liver leads to fat in the liver. So we end up focusing kind of on the third step of the strategy. We call it be kind to your liver, and we can kind of touch on these bases. And that sets us up for the fourth part of the strategy, which is we're going to restore your ability to burn fat. Because, one of the things that's, I think, a big aha moment for people in our programs is when I talk to them about the fact that, insulin's a storage hormone, and when your insulin levels are, at a certain level, you cannot burn fat because insulin stops you from burning fat. And people start to realize that they're in a one-way fat storage situation. They can store it, but they can't lose it. Or as I think David Ludwig says, turnstile. You've got fat turnstile, right? It can go in, but it can't come out. So when you do the first three things, you actually start to lower the insulin level. So you actually start getting below the level that people can actually start to flip on fat burning. And so we really just leverage that, and one of the ways that we like to leverage is just time restricted eating. And what happens there is the further you're away from the meal, the more likely your insulin levels are to be low anyways. As you get a little bit further along with kind of these measures, what you start to find is you come fairly low. Your insulin level goes low enough, you can start fat burning again. Your body starts to access the fat storage. And then we just extend the fast. We like people to start at 12 hours and then just extend it.
And what's the maximum that you would extend it to, or is there a maximum?
So we tend to land on, for most people, we tend to land to about 16 or 18 hours. And the key to all of this is that it's not hard. If it's hard, it's not working, right? If it's hard, it means that you're not accessing the fat. And so you have to kind of be patient with that process. Some people are able to do it very quickly, others aren't. Where I like to go with it is often kind of 16 hours with an 8-hour eating window. And then if we're trying to have people lose weight, it's like, let's do 2 well-constructed whole food meals during those 8 hours. You get all your nutrients, you get your fiber, you get enough protein, you're going to feel satiated, you're going to feel you've got a good energy. But you're going to have essentially generated a pretty decent calorie deficit. And you're burning fat. And so, getting people to that becomes very sustainable because, they've already learned how to kind of get their meals kind of corrected in the first step. They're active, so they're actually improving their ability to absorb carbohydrate anyways, but they're also improving their ability to burn fat just from exercise. We've dealt with kind of anything that's particularly going on in the liver. Now we can just kind of ride this, and people can do this quite sustainably. And so then that becomes, the way that they start to lose weight. And now it gets easier because as they lose weight, they start to pull some of that fat out of the liver. The insulin resistance becomes less, which just makes it becomes a virtuous cycle.
Right.
So, on the way up, it's this vicious cycle where, and when I describe it to people, they're a little bit like, you're kidding me. So, as my insulin level goes up, that means I'm going to gain fat. As I gain fat, I can't store it in the right places. So it ends up getting stored. I store some of that in my liver, and that liver fat drives up my insulin. Wait, that's a loop, right? And you get stuck on that vicious cycle. We really unravel the loop, which is, as you get the insulin levels down a little bit lower, you can actually lose fat. And as you lose fat, that helps get the insulin levels lower. And so you get into this virtuous cycle. And so that's the 4 of our 4+2. The +2 end up coming back to cortisol and just this recognition that if you're super stressed out and you're driving high levels of cortisol counteracts insulin. And so, it increases appetite and counteracts insulin. So it makes insulin resistance worse. So you have to deal with stress. And the same thing with lack of sleep. If you're not sleeping, you actually drive a cortisol response. And so we'll see people in our programs who, many people don't have, the +2 issues, but some people, that's the key issue. It's, they are just maximally stressed. And unless they deal with the stress, it's going to be very hard for them to break the other part of it. So in it, when we give people the strategy, it's a little bit like giving them a map, and they start to see kind of how, and then the assessment is a little bit like the GPS, which is like, okay, where are you on this map, and how do you proceed? And then we use data for feedback. And so you start to realize that, I'm feeling better, my weight's coming down, my glucose levels are improving, my blood panel, my triglycerides are improving, my liver function tests are improving. This is working. And really what we look at is trying to get people to this sustainable path that they can do forever, because they will need to do it forever, right?
Yeah, it's the number one question that most of my clients will say. They're like, "So how long do I do this for?" And I'm like, "Well,
Yeah.
as long as you'd like to be free of your diseases, and as long as you'd like to have lots of energy, and as long as you'd like to, try and prevent as many, future conditions that, people often say come with aging, but that's not true. It only comes with aging in an unhealthy way.
Right.
If you've been eating, an unhealthy diet or living an unhealthy lifestyle. There's two things that I love about what you do. Number one is, figuring out where the person is on the map, because that's the thing. You might have somebody who comes in who's like, I love cooking, I cook really healthy, but they're staying up super late at night. They have stress in their life. They don't have never heard of meditation. They don't know the importance of sleep. I used to be one of those people where I would just be like, I don't need sleep. And, I would kickstart my adrenal system like right at like 10 o'clock at night and do my best work until 3 in the morning. And this is definitely not a way to live life, because it does catch up with you, and sleep is so important. So I would have been one of those people who
Right.
ate really well, but for 16 years I did not move my body. Like, after I chased my little ones around and then they became old enough to, not want to go to the park, all of a sudden I was, working more behind my desk. And so I would have been one of the people where you would have been like, okay, let's figure out how to get movement into your life. Like, let's do a few squats, or let's do like whatever it is, even just walking. Um, I'm obviously moving my body now to the point where I'm doing it at the levels that are probably causing more stress in my body as an endurance athlete. But I'm doing it because I'm trying to do this big thing. And eventually I'll sit in a happy place after all of this is over. I'm hoping where I move my body appropriately, and as a person could and should. I should say, I always hate to use the word should. Um, yeah, so I love the part about meeting people where they're at, and you have this 4+2. So like, let's work on, I almost see it like that wheel, and you can color in the different sections of the pie chart, and whatever pie chart's not colored in very much, well, let's start there. Because often when you really address one thing, it sometimes addresses, more pieces of the pie than you'd
Right.
think. The other part that I really love, about your program as well, is, you had mentioned earlier, just addressing the barriers, because I think this is something that we forget when we're working with individuals. Is there's so many barriers that people have. Like, one of the biggest barriers I find is just in the family relationship, where one person is trying to get healthy, but then the rest of the family is like, we don't have to do that, or what are you talking about? You need more protein, or you need more fat, or you need more this or that. And that's a huge barrier. And individuals, I find, need a lot of help navigating just their relationships. And sometimes it's not the relationship in the immediate family, but I've had clients who learn how to eat well, move well, do all of this, and then they go to work, and their colleagues in their work environment are almost shaming them for
Right.
wanting to take control of their health and change their diet and eat differently. And so they're constantly questioning them and inundating them and telling, almost, I don't know. So, almost wanting to get them off the horse. And I find that's unfortunate. So having somebody in your corner who can help you identify your barriers, and there might be financial barriers, right? We know that that is a huge barrier for a lot of Canadians. We think of us as being a very developed, wealthy country, but we have some of like, the biggest levels of poverty in very wealthy communities. In West Vancouver, I used to teach in a school there where the kids would come to school without food because the parents had inherited, this home from their boomer families, but now they couldn't afford to pay the property taxes. And, a lot of them are not working, and their kids don't. So they had to develop a hot lunch program in a very, I would say, well-to-do school in a well-to-do neighborhood. And so we have to remember all of these different barriers, and having somebody in your corner who can teach you how to eat well, but also eat in inexpensive ways is really important. So I love that your program addresses all of those things, because without doing that, then we're not going to see the success and and see people actually want to walk this path and stick to it, because it's not a path of like, let's hop on and then for a quick fix. It's not a quick fix solution, right? It is a lifestyle change.
Yeah, and that's kind of where we really try to emphasize it's not a diet, right? Diets are temporary restrictions, and so really what we're trying to do is help people find this new lifestyle. And um, my wife and co-founder came up with this model around it's knowledge, skills, environment, and then application. And so too often, we kind of go from, well, if once they understand it, then now it's just accountability and applying it. But it disregards this notion of, do they have the skills necessary to do some of these things? And especially, with food, not everyone's got the skills to actually make really delicious food from whole ingredients, right?
And some people don't have the desire. I am one of those people. I can cook. There's no doubt about that. But my least favorite place to be in the world is in the kitchen.
Like certain irony there, right?
But my husband loves it. So, we had to, we found that happy balance early on in our relationship. He knew nothing about food. He was so sick when I first met him, like mucus draining out of his face and his body and covered in eczema all over. And, and it took a couple weeks of just cutting out some very obvious things like the dairy and the, cheap white French baguettes that, he's French Canadian, and a lot of these cheeses that he were eating that was contributing. And all of a sudden that shifted, and like, no more mucus, no more eczema. But it took a long time because I had to shift him, and like, he had to develop the knowledge. So he had the skill in the kitchen, just needed the knowledge. Right. I had the knowledge, but did not want to have the skill in the kitchen. Right. So it definitely, you need to really look at your strengths, work with your strengths, and then have somebody just help identify different ways of navigating, your family situation.
And the other thing that, in lifestyle medicine is just the pillars are all interconnected, right? And so, you look at it, and that's where we get a pretty good sense of kind of where people are having issues, but you also have to kind of start to figure out where you're going to tackle it, right? And so often we'll see people who have a high degree of stress, and they're not sleeping well, and they're not exercising, and they're not eating well, and so you start to unravel a little bit, and it's it's a little bit like, well, if we make a few changes to your nutrition, you'll have a little bit more energy, and that'll get you out to do a bit more exercise, which will improve your sleep. And we get you sleeping and exercising, that'll really drive your stress down, which will give you more energy to go back and make those nutrition changes. And so we kind of come all the way around, the circle with those. Relationships, we all know that if your relationship pillar is shaken, everything else seems to fall apart too. So spending that time with with your family, spending time with friends, having that time, so important. And then it all comes back to purpose, right? If you're don't have that strong sense of purpose, then what's it all for? And it's interesting because I'll see a lot of people that are in transitions, and they are actually kind of low on the purpose side of things. And I kind of say to them, lifestyle, like these lifestyle measures, make them your purpose for a while. It's like a little transition object, right? It's, I always kind of joke about, the psychology of transition objects, where, a baby just wants to cling to mom. So we give the baby a blanket and the baby learns to cling to the blanket and love that. And it's this transition object from that maternal love. On purpose, I think you can make a transition object being your lifestyle, and saying, what, maybe I don't have the strongest direction of where I want to go or what my life is for right now. But I'm gonna put it all around, getting my health in taking control of my health. And in our practice, what I found is that people do that. They really get into it, they enjoy it, and then stuff emerges, and just all of a sudden they're down a new path, and it's a different world for them, which, again, kind of, not what you typically do in a doctor's office, right? Like talking about people's purpose, but hugely rewarding to see somebody who, may have come to you for one reason, but really takes control of their health, and then their life purpose becomes, transformed by it.
And then through making their health their life purpose right now, often what I find is they actually discover their bigger purpose.
Right, exactly.
And this is the part that is so magical when you watch a client go, oh my gosh, I have been waiting for this moment my whole life, but they had to heal themselves first physically. And
Right.
through that physical healing, then this spiritual, mental, emotional healing takes place. And this is the part that I'm just always so amazed when a, client gives themselves that gift. And yes, temporarily, we're not going to focus on that bigger purpose. Well, we have to, for example, like you said, I think it's a great analogy, cling on to that baby blanket, and that baby blanket is your health, like your physical health. It's your eating, it's your sleeping, it's your, moving your body, and not feeling selfish for giving that to you, and knowing that like that is your ultimate priority right now. And then you allow, and the rest flows in, like it'll be like an aha moment. And I've seen that with a client who is an accountant who, her dream was to paint, and it wasn't until she was healed, and all of a sudden the painting she was producing, like one of her first shows was in an art exhibit, in Whistler. And when I saw the paint, I was like, this is not the woman that I was working with, who had like no painting skills before, but it was through healing herself that she discovered it. And I have so many stories like that, it's really opening a gateway, and watching that amazing innate human potential shine through at the end. And then it's a gift that keeps on giving, because when that person is inundated with the pain of the disease, and the lack of energy of the disease, and the mental anguish of the disease, then all of a sudden, once all that is lifted, what they give to their families is profound as well, watching those relationships blossom. So, they grow healthy communities, healthy families, and, they're making healthy food for everybody. It's honestly the gift that keeps on giving, for sure.
Yeah,
that's what you've created with, the Wellness Garage, 100%.
It definitely pays forward, right? And
Yeah.
So I find with what we're doing, there's no one size fits all. It's all individual. It's all figuring out, kind of helping each person find their path, and accelerate in that path, and get to a place where they're really comfortable, and all these things happen. And I think the hard part when you look at this is why does this happen to so many people, that they find themselves lost and without a path? And that's something that I think, as a society, we really have to look at is, why is this happening? And it's something that I've given a lot of thought to, and you've given a lot of thought to, and the only way we can change it is kind of one by one, helping people find their path, or inspiring people so that the light bulb goes off, and there's a different way. But there are some real challenges within our society around kind of how we've structured things, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and the thing is that we're always going to have stressors in society from the way that it's structured. And I know you've seen this, that the resiliency that's built up when someone starts to eat well, and move their body, and sleep well, you develop a resiliency that, you could be in a war-torn country, you could be in, a city with tons of environmental noise and light pollution, you can be, anywhere where the stressors are there and they're real, but you have the resiliency to be able to manage them. Your brain and your neurons, you have enough mitochondria that it's creating enough energy that you're able to think clearly, that you're able to take the appropriate actions in those very stressful environments. And I see that over and over again where, clients come to me and often, they've worked with the counselors and the psychologists and the psychiatrists. And of course, then a lot of times they're on the medications and then other chronic diseases set in. And, it was their mental health, which was the first to affect them. But then they switch their diet, they shift, their physiology shifts, their metabolism shifts, they have more energy. And then all of a sudden, one client in particular, like she wanted to leave her partner, quit her job, commit suicide. She was like, my life is over. I cannot live in this world anymore. And by making these changes, the things that you teach at the Wellness Garage, the things that we teach at Real to Heal, nothing changed. She had the same job, same partner, same house, same environment. But by shifting her body and developing that energy, all of a sudden, she's still with her partner 15 years later, got promoted in her job, went back to school, still living in the same house. And every time I see her, she's like, life is awesome. Nothing in her environment changed other than she shifted herself with food, with sleep, was able to get off the medications. And this is the part that I love, is that it builds resiliency that, we are in this society with so much digital technology and so the stuff that, kids see on TV. And I'm seeing like definitely the kids are the most effective because they've been born into a world of glyphosate and heavy pesticide use. They've been born into the world of, intense pollution of all kinds, noise, light, digital, pollution. And, I'm seeing it affect these kids even more. But even for them, like these young students that I work with, like they're able to develop their resiliency, and the resiliency comes fast. It's not like once you make the commitment to do this, to work with you, work with me, work with anybody who's in lifestyle medicine that is teaching these beautiful principles, you start to feel better really fast. And it's not a linear, like I feel awful and now I feel amazing. It's a roller coaster. Like, we don't want to kid you here, because you are making lifestyle changes and you're going to be making some hard changes. And a lot of people often eat for comfort, and they often eat for memory, and they often eat for, to soothe or to celebrate all of these things. So they have to navigate their world now in this new context of eating or putting exercise first and movement first. And I get that. So don't think that it's like this, you take off and you're flying. But I mean, initially when you get started, it almost feels like that, because to go from no energy to having energy is pretty profound.
Yeah, it's, I think for me as a physician doing this, the biggest kind of aha was just the body's ability to heal itself. I didn't appreciate it. I honestly didn't, right? And I remember a patient who came in relatively early when we had opened, and he was on 200 units plus of insulin a day. He had an insulin pump. He had been on insulin for 15 years, and on an insulin pump for 9 years, right? So it just was, unbelievable levels of and his diabetes was still not controlled, right? His A1C, I think, was over 10 when I first saw him. So my first question, was, is he even producing, any insulin? So I checked the C-peptide, and he's producing some on his own, but super low. And it was amazing watching this guy heal, right? And, within the course of 3 weeks of just changing his nutrition, when he first came in, he said, I'm in so much pain, it just hurts to move my joints. I can't possibly exercise. And so we just started really pretty simply and, working on his nutrition. In 3 weeks, he came back, he goes, I don't know what's going on, but, I'm only on 50 units of insulin. So he had knocked off 150 units in like 3 weeks. And then it was really, and I don't have this pain anymore. Right. And now I can exercise. And, and he was able to come completely off of, insulin. And, I wouldn't have thought that was possible. I had another fellow who came in, and again, not as dramatic, but we got him off insulin in probably about 3 or 4 weeks. and he's just improving a lot. And he just looked at me, said, like, where were you 9 years ago? I wish I had seen you 9 years ago. And I kind of laughed. I said, well, 9 years ago, I would have done what your doctor did, right? Like, part of this is just this realization that, as we understand these mechanisms and really understand the root cause of it, then we're better able to guide people. And so, just seeing that body's ability to heal itself is just, it's profound. It's humbling from as a physician, it's just humbling to see it. The other part that's kind of cool is, you see this, and we do, a fair amount of lab work to kind of figure out where people are. And then you see the lab work, and we'll kind of code it in a heat map. So, kind of red is the bad stuff, and yellow is kind of in between, and green is stuff that's optimal. And you see this color shift happen. And again, that's so profound because, we'll prescribe plenty of drugs, and drugs can do some things, but you don't get anything like what you get when you make these kind of transformations. And it's all possible there, right? So I think that body's innate resilience to really get back to being healthy, it's still there, even in kind of the most advanced kind of cases. And really, kind of for everybody, it's just discover that path. They're going to feel better, and the path that they can do, that they feel better, will help them kind of keep progressing. And so, that's the trick.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up, because this is actually a really important point. For anybody who's listening to this that's thinking like, I'll just do this on my own. Yeah, you definitely can. You can change up your diet, you can read a book, you can apply it. But one of the things we have to manage really carefully, especially most of my clients are on, a dozen to 36, 37, 40 meds, all in one go. And we have to manage this so carefully, because if you are on blood pressure lowering meds, cholesterol meds, antidepressants, if you're on thyroid medications, infertility drugs, and if you're on, insulin, we have to manage this, because your body heals so fast. And we're talking about in a matter of days, you may have to reduce your blood pressure lowering meds. This just happened with a client of mine. There are a couple diabetic. The doctor said, okay, the metformin and all the other drugs aren't working. We're going to have to put you on insulin now, 76 years old. And, for them, they, and I said, listen, you need to either contact your doctor today, like as you're starting, and let them know that they might have to titrate your meds down, bring the medicine dose down. And a lot of people don't take me seriously, because they think, well, it can't happen that fast, right? And so then they go through a period of not feeling well. I'm like, why do I have such low energy? And I'm like, you have to take your blood pressure. You have to make sure you do your glucose readings and take that, because it will happen fast. And so, of course, blood pressure was coming down too low, because it was already,
Right.
healed by the diet, and then to apply the medications on that's coming down too low. So, and it's hard now, especially with COVID, like you might not get an appointment for 3-4 weeks. That's too far, so this is where I say, call, our nurses hotline is what, 411, 811?
811, yeah.
Yeah, 811. And so to call and, and talk to them, because at least they can get a doctor on the phone pretty fast to let you know. And so that's exactly what happened. So we were able to get an appointment, because it is scary. Like a lot of people who've been on medications, they listen to their doctors. They say, take 2 pills in the morning, 2 pills at night, and they're doing that. But, you have to really advocate for your own health, and then make sure your doctors know that this can happen. Because if they're not trained in lifestyle medicine, functional medicine, or knowledgeable about disease reversal and how fast it happens, they might say like, no, keep your medications where they're at. Whereas somebody like yourself, or, the doctors I often refer to, they'll be like, oh yeah, no, time to lower them. And that's exactly what, their doctor said, time to come off, all of the heart disease meds. And, next we're working on the insulin. And, Yeah, so do not take that lightly for anybody who is listening to this, because you can feel worse being on drugs that are bringing everything too low than you actually were feeling when you actually were just, not making the lifestyle changes.
Well, the first principle in the Hippocratic Oath is do no harm. And it is actually one of the, so if people are going to go on to, a very strict and sudden change in terms of their nutrition, and they're on insulin or they're on a sulfonylurea like, glycoside or glyburide, you can actually, they can actually get such low sugars that they can be hospitalized. So, if I see somebody who's on insulin and they're planning to just jump all in, we generally lower, and they're reasonably well controlled, we generally lower their insulin by 50% on day one, right? Yeah. So it's just that dramatic. And
let's just repeat that. Let's repeat that, because I need our audience to understand that. You just said you will lower their insulin by 50% on day one.
Right. So really, the thing that we have to do here is to make sure that people don't get in trouble here is, if you're taking insulin and you're going to make these kinds of changes, you need to have a plan in place to titrate down. And so, working with your doctor, working with your pharmacist, you can kind of put in place a plan to kind of de-prescribe on that direction. And then the sulfonylureas, the glycoside and glyburides, they've been first-line drugs for a lot of years. So a lot of people are on them. They're cheap. And so those drugs, very, very commonly used. And again, they keep working even when you've taken all the carbohydrate out of the diet or taken all the fast carbs out of the diet. They keep working so that you get these low sugars. So they have to be, adjusted. The other diabetes medications, are more forgiving and can be done kind of, over time. Blood pressure medications for sure, right? And again, you'll see that. And different people, there's such variation there, so you really have to watch it. So usually kind of there, when people are doing it on their own, kind of the thing is you can do this on your own, and it's, but you need to have a plan around your meds. You need to understand your meds well enough to know, okay, are there any on my list that could get me in trouble? And then you need to approach your doctor, your pharmacist, to say, hey, I'm going to be doing this. You can check your own sugars so you can see where they are. You can check your own blood pressure so you can see where it is. So you've got the tools to actually monitor it yourself. But that's what you really do need to do.
Yeah. And when they're checking their glucose, they should be checking it 2 hours after they've eaten, correct?
Well, so it depends, right? So it tells you different things at different times, right? So your fasting sugar in the morning is always interesting because it tells you really how much insulin resistance is happening at the liver, because all the glucose that you're checking is been produced by the liver overnight, right? You haven't eaten for 8+ hours. That glucose is coming from the liver, and it should be normal if the liver would respond to insulin properly, right? So your fasting glucose really tells you about your liver and kind of what's happening there. And then if you can kind of assess, 2 hours after, you can see, have your sugars gone back to normal after your meal. I like people sometimes checking it kind of an hour after. How much did that meal make you spike, right? And this is where, we're using continuous glucose monitoring a lot now in our practice. And even with pre-diabetics, not from the standpoint that they have much to worry about with high or low sugars, but more from the standpoint of the feedback around the meals that they have.
Right.
And this is where, it's actually kind of important that, so we often will describe kind of, eating this whole food approach and eating kind of foods that are, are good, and we're not concerned because there's low glycemic load. But people are variable on glycemic load, and with the continuous glucose monitor, you'll find that you know, that steel cut oats and blueberries that, you know, you've just told somebody is absolutely fine. Lo and behold, some people will actually spike on that, and you know, that's just not going to work for them. So again, kind of one of the things that we find is using kind of these data sources to help guide you on your path and figure out, okay, you know, maybe there are particular foods that, you know, counterintuitively don't work for you from that standpoint. And CGM's actually been a pretty interesting tool for that.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. I have a question for you around, I have so many questions for you that we're probably going to have to do this again, but I know that there's several companies that are starting, and they're basically AI companies for, and not to replace the GP, but basically where there's going to be like this extensive monitoring and the ability to track, you know, individuals. And there's a company starting in Canada that looks, I mean, it really looks promising, you know, to help people essentially gather all this data on themselves and to really see, and to even have these systems be able to manage the medications, manage the treatment plans, manage the, you know, almost to be able to diagnose, you know, treat and prescribe. And yeah, and so I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, because we do, and I'll just jump in by saying, you know, as you were talking, what I love about what you're doing is you constantly reminded me of when, you know, doctors used to make home visits, and they can see the family's environment. They can see, you know, what foods were on the counter. They can touch the patient. They can see them. It was very, very different. They can communicate. They kind of got to know everybody. And then we moved to a model of, you know, moving into the office. And then we moved to computers where the doctors are just at their computers, not even looking at the patient anymore. And now we're moving into what looks like this, you know, interesting AI world.
Yeah, so it's, I mean, it's interesting because on the tech side, there's a lot that we can do to kind of close the loop in terms of feedback, right? So, you know, really kind of when we look at it, what we want to do is, so you take kind of our 4+2 strategy for diabetes reversal. So it's a strategy. Like any strategy, you then layer underneath it some tactics, right? So what tactics are we going to use under this strategy? And then you need feedback. Are these tactics working? Is the strategy working? And so the feedback will come from data, and you can definitely automate a lot of this stuff, right? And in fact, one of the ways that we're able to deliver our kind of experience is that we automate a lot of the data part of it. But that's not really why people come to see their doctor, right? Or they come to see you. They need support, right? And they need perspective. And, you know, one of the things that, so when I look at the technology, I think it's great coming into healthcare if it allows the doctor to be a person and do things that people do well, right? So you think about it, you know, computers do phenomenal jobs at tracking data and storing data and recording and then drawing insights. And there's all sorts of things that computers do way better than humans. But humans are really good at, you know, compassion and empathy and understanding and creativity and dialogue. And these are all the things that, you know, when you kind of look at what's kind of quote unquote wrong in healthcare, it's often these things have been pulled out of healthcare as we've gotten. So I kind of look at it from the perspective of, you know, practitioners that are bringing kind of the technology in place so that it can take care of the jobs that tech's good at, so that they can be human beings and do what human beings are good at. Human beings are really good at problem solving, right? Like we're better than computers at some of these just you know, immediate problems. And so that's kind of, you know, I look at it and welcome it. And I think that, you know, often I'll see people get really excited about the tech of tracking. And I have to remind people, it's, you know, it's just like the map is not the territory. You have to, you know, you have to watch it. And one of my favorite ones, I just posted this on our blog today around sleep is, you know, if you don't have trouble falling asleep, right? And you don't have trouble staying asleep, and you wake up and you feel rested and full of energy, and you don't fall asleep, easily, during the day, you're sleeping well.
Yeah. You
don't need to track that, and in fact, all you're going to do by tracking it is probably make yourself feel like you're ill, because, like I have an Oura ring, and my REM sleep never registers, right? And I just have like, dreaming all night, and kind of doesn't register REM sleep. And so on that metric, it's in the red, right? And so, it's simply just not that accurate, right? And so again, kind of, I feel really good. And so you have to watch that. And I think that perspective is hugely important. And then we often, as individuals, don't have good perspective, right? So there's a reason why doctors need doctors for themselves, because they don't have the perspective. They got the knowledge, but like doctors are either the biggest hypochondriacs, or they simply deny that there's anything wrong, right? And so you need somebody else sometimes there to kind of tap you on the shoulder and go, that's what's going on, right? And people need people, right? So yeah, I think the technology, I think it's welcoming if it creates more people time. And Eric Topol, who's kind of a digital health guru, he's really pointing to that kind of world where doctors actually get freed by the technology to be doctors again, and not kind of scribes typing into the computer.
Yeah, no, definitely. And we need that, because often we've seen where really, really important symptoms are missed, and often that can come with like even just shaking the patient's hand, or putting a hand on the shoulder and feeling if their skin is clammy, or registering if their skin looks a bit blue or gray, or whatever it is, and looking into their eyes. There's so many little tiny pieces that could be registered. I think the most important one is just that trust, right? By looking into somebody's eyes, seeing them, letting them know that they've been seen, and that it is a safe place to be able to, maybe share like, hey, what, I actually am not sleeping well, or I'm not in a great relationship, or whatever that is. But, you're often not going to get that without making that eye contact, and, sometimes physical contact. And it's what I love about my kids' school. They go to Waldorf, and every single morning the teacher stands at the front door, and not a single student gets past without shaking the teacher's hand. They look them in the eyes and they say, how is your morning going so far? And it's just so beautiful, because these like sweet kids are able to say like, oh, it was a tough morning, or whatever it was. And then the teacher gets a sense of, where they're at. But what happens is they make that connection. The child is seen, and sometimes only seen once that day, right? And for patients as well, for especially, we're in the middle of COVID, it could be the only time that person is seen is when they go to the doctor's office, and that doctor can look at them in the eyes. So I agree with you. All for the AI technology if it allows physicians to be more human. And physicians are human, and I think they need the connection as well to individuals, and they can develop incredible relationships with their patients too, even if it's only 7.5 minutes, for sure.
Well, it's really true. Like physician burnout is very real. In fact, physicians have far higher rates of suicide than most other professions, and it's devastating to see that. And one of the things I think that practicing lifestyle medicine gives back to physicians is it's that human connection of like, so all I do is help people find their own way to do the things, right? I can't do it. I'm not giving them pills to do it. I'm simply helping them find their own path, and they make these changes. But when people come in having transformed their health and their lives, the energy that comes back to the physician is so gratifying, and it's why we went to med school, right? It's why we're doing this, and unfortunately that gets lost along the way in the realities of these 7-minute visits, and typing everything into the computer, and kind of dealing with the insurance forms, and dealing kind of with multiple medications. It's it can be a very complex job that you don't get a lot of gratification from, and very stressful. and so, it gives back that way.
Yeah, and you are ultimately, and I've seen that from, med students that have, I've taught, physicians that have been in practice for 25 years that I've taught. And, and I've seen that burnout firsthand. I've been at conferences where, physicians are showing me the scars on their wrists from a few years earlier. And it's exactly what you said. They went into healthcare because they wanted to provide health to people. And then you have physicians that are like, okay, well, that's not working, so I want to bring the care back in. So they develop their practice all around care, but they're potentially missing, many of the elements that you provide at the wellness garage, whether it's, the nutrition or, talking about sleep and all of that. So meanwhile, they're caring for their patients, but then health is still being missed. What I see you doing is you're providing the health and the care that truly is meant to be part of our healthcare system. And you're showing that it can be done through the model that you created. And I'm assuming, like, if you had people that are like, please franchise, have you thought about that model?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the with COVID, having the physical spaces as has been very challenging, right?
Yeah.
And so we're very thankful we've been able to develop the virtual side of things. So one of the things that we are doing is taking our diabetes 4+2 program, and we've virtualized it and turning it into something that can be available for anybody across the country, and getting multiple physicians and dietitians to be able to practice in this virtual practice, with all the tools that we've created,
like for all the data collection and everything.
Yeah.
And will there be, when you're doing this, will there be a central hub for the data as well that you'll be able to analyze as?
Yeah. So one of the intriguing parts of this is again, so when we do the wellness quotient, one of the metrics there is a carbohydrate tolerance score. And it correlates so closely with insulin resistance. And so in a way, you just need to ask those questions and you actually know what the lab results are going to be. So having kind of that data and being able to kind of compare that data, I think is really useful. But ultimately, what we try to do is use the data to improve our own practice so we're better at it, but use it to help that person understand and kind of give them that feedback. Are the tactics that they're using working, and then is the strategy overall working, and kind of and go from there.
Yeah, that's the only one thing that if you aren't doing it already or thought about doing it, it's to have that, the population studies be done now within the context of your 4+2 program around diabetes, and then publishing that, because that's ultimately, what we just need to keep doing is being able to show a lot of, government bodies and, people who are outsourcing often to potentially the wrong researchers. I mean, the data you're going to get back is dependent on the questions that you're asking. So we need to ask different questions, and obviously design different studies. One of the questions being around the actual reversal of the disease versus the management of the disease. And that's a part where I find that quite interesting, because if you are able to have your program in the hands of many physicians across Canada or even internationally, then, being able to collect that data, I mean, it's going to speak for itself. So the one question I do have, because I teach the opposite to my clients. So my clients are on a high carb program for diabetes reversal, and we get probably very similar results. And we're high carb, low fat, high fiber. And we get, within the same amount of time, A1C levels are coming down. 3 months in, we're seeing it, for like a few days in, a few weeks in, and then we're always obviously going back for more lab work. And glucose readings are coming back amazingly, despite the fact that they're actually consuming high carb foods. So I'm curious for you, because you're also an endurance athlete and you're a cyclist and
a runner.
Do you practice low carb in your life, or?
Yeah, so let me kind of be really kind of clear here. Low carb high fat can work. Low fat, high carb can work. Medium carb, medium fat can work. What doesn't work is high carb, high fat, right? And so when you look at most people's diet, that's the problem, right? So we tend to get, from nutrition in our macros, our brains seem to control our protein intake pretty well. There's a great Kevin Hall study where he's a NIH researcher who did this study in the metabolic wards where they measure everything. And so, he took a group of people, I think it was 20 people, and half the group started with 14 days on the ultra processed food diet, and they could eat ad libitum. So they could basically have a buffet table of the ultra processed food. And then they switched over to a whole food approach, right? And the other half started with whole foods and then flipped over to the ultra processed foods. So each person was their own control in this study. What he found simply was that people overate when they were at the ultra processed food stage. They overate by 500 calories per day, and almost evenly divided between overeating on carbs and overeating on fat. And so protein actually was remarkably stable. And what he also showed was essentially, when they're eating the whole food approach, basically their ghrelin levels, so their kind of appetite stimulating hormone levels, were decreased. Their leptin levels were increased. Their PYY, which is a satiation hormone from your gut, was increased. So basically all the hormones that are associated with appetite and satiation had moved in a direction that would keep people from eating. Right. And so really one of the things that you kind of realize is this ultra processed food it's hacking our body, right? So it's hacking our system so that we don't actually detect the energy that's in, and we overeat. And so that's where, I'm just not very dogmatic about it. And in fact, there's another study by Chris Gardner at Stanford where they look at, they basically looked at, well-constructed, low carb, high fat, well-constructed, low fat, high carb. And there was actually equal weight loss between both groups. Some people did well on one approach, some people did well on the other approach, some people didn't do well on one approach. And so there's variability, which you see across the board. So I kind of find for what I look at is what's going to work for you. And so the first part is, we've got to get rid of that ultra processed food, right? So if we get the ultra processed food out, and then by and large, it's a little bit what people will gravitate towards. And so I end up being not very prescriptive around this, which is kind of funny being a doctor and not being prescriptive. I'm really looking for, what's the eating pattern that you're going to be most comfortable with. If we step back and look at research, the best research out there from a medical perspective on diets is Mediterranean diets, right? And Mediterranean diet is reasonably high in fat. It's actually, it's got lots of veg in there. There's lots of healthy carbs in there. There's a bit of fish in there. There's some wine in there. That's actually kind of the best evidence out there. So to me, the issue, these diets are just coming out of the wrong direction, right? And so, you go whole food. Now, predominantly, if you go whole food plant-based, you're probably going to end up with a higher amount of carbohydrate and a bit lower amount of fat. And that's going to be just fine, right? And then again, you'll see, right? Some people don't satiate as well, and that you end up increasing the fat a little bit in that context. So I find you have to measure it that way. For myself, I've been plant-based, pescatarian. So I eat fish once or twice a week. And that's been kind of the way I've been for 30 years. I did go low carb for a while, and that was pretty interesting. I had a period in my life where I was quite a bit heavier. So I had gained a bunch of weight, and so right now I weigh about 175 pounds at 6'2". That's what I was in med school. but I went up to almost, well, 217. So I had 40 plus pounds on my current frame.
Was that because of med school?
No, this was 3 kids in 4 years plus a startup company.
Right. Yeah, I did the same. Yeah.
So I gained the weight, and being a runner, I just thought, well, I'll run it off, and that worked for a little bit. So I got the weight down to like 205, and then I realized I had to kind of pay more attention to kind of just, how much I was eating, and so that got my weight down to 190. When I went low carb for a while, what was quite amazing for me was I dropped from 190 to 175 like very quickly, and I don't have a lot of explanation for it, because I wasn't eating all that poorly. But when I was prior to that, I'd keep veering up, and I keep kind of having to watch it. When I went low carb for that period of time, there's clearly a metabolic switch that flipped for me, even though no insulin resistance. There's nothing on my blood work that would give me any guidance that way.
Yeah.
And then since then, I've really, I've migrated back to my normal, but I've stayed the same weight. So the low carb was actually pretty useful from the standpoint of flipping some internal set point that is just stuck, and so that's worked for me. What I don't like about low carb, high fat approaches is as I said at the beginning of this, is food quality I worry about. And then the other thing I think people really do want to pay attention to is what's happening with their lipid panels, because we sometimes will see people, their LDL cholesterol goes really high, and then you got to be sure that you get your doctor to check the ApoB100 so that how many particles there are, because that's what's going to drive cardiovascular risk. But yeah, so not. I think if I'm ideologic about anything, it's whole foods.
Yeah, myself as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and then navigate within that, and see what you feel well on.
And I love that you experimented too, because you were in a healthy state, but recognized you had gained the weight, and then you started to change things and recognized that okay, you can only take yourself that far, and then you plateau, and then you're like, okay, I'm going to try something else. When you stick in the context of whole foods, it's okay to experiment that way, when you have a relatively healthy body, or even if you are even within the work that you're doing, like you're saying, you look at the individual, and sometimes people are going to have a little bit more higher fat, or a little bit more higher carbs, or lower. But it's important for as individuals are out there and finding all of these, claims that are being made, you have to look into them. Because one of the things that I always get mesmerized by the before and after pictures on Instagram. I'm like, how do these people do it? Like, I'm out there and I'm biking 15 hours a week and running like, 30, 40K a week. And it's like, how did they get so toned and muscular? And sometimes I find that they did have bariatric surgery, and they definitely worked hard. Like all their pictures prove that they started moving their body and that they started changing their diet. But then also, yes, they did have surgery as well. So it's really important for people to see that. For me, surgery, I'm not in a position to need surgery, but I would like to experiment with lots of different ways before maybe resorting to surgery, because we know the risk, right, of being in the hospital and being in a situation. There's many risks that come with just having to get surgery. So just for people out there, know that there are many approaches. You can use your body as a living laboratory. Do it under the care of a qualified physician. So when I say qualified, yes, they might have their license as a medical practitioner, but there is a huge difference between somebody that practices, like Brendan, and somebody who might say, oh, your diet has nothing to do with your illness, or you can't reverse your disease. So if the person is coming to you saying you can't reverse the disease, never been done, never been proven, I've heard that from many physicians, that, there's many physicians out there. So I often say, fire that one physician and go hire another one, probably somebody like Brendan and his team at Wellness Garage, because of the fact that, you can get incredible results. Your bodies are so amazing. And ultimately they do want to heal, and you just need to find the right balance for yourself.
Yeah, and everyone's path is different, right? And that's kind of where you have to kind of look and try to find your path. And sometimes you find it by doing kind of, thoughtful experiments and trying to eat a different way or trying different things. And it is really useful to do that with kind of someone else to give you perspective.
Yeah.
Problem sometimes when we do things on our own, and myself included, is we don't really remember what exactly we started doing this for. Like it's amazing how you can find yourself, why am I taking this supplement that I decided to take, and what do I think it's supposed to be doing, and how am I measuring it? Generally, when you work with somebody, that they'll help you with that perspective. They'll remind you of that perspective, and ultimately help you find the path that works for you. And that's all that counts, right? Is that you feel good, you feel healthy, you're full of energy, and your symptoms go away.
Yeah. And then you won't have to feel like a ping pong, with every new marketing ad that comes out for the next diet or the next supplement or the next cleanse or the next whatever it is. Once you find what works for you, then you just stick with it. And
Right.
you can assess it yourself. If you're sleeping well, if you're pooping well, if your libido's there, if you're able to move your body, if things feel good. I mean, you're ultimately going to be the best judge of that, your overall total health. I can keep talking to you forever, but I know that you have work to do and get back to. And I want to thank you very much for just coming on the podcast and sharing your knowledge, because you taking your time out of the day to be able to share stories of your patients healing, to be able to inspire other physicians to rethink the practices that they have or the practices that they work within. This is really truly how we are going to change our communities and support the most amount of people. And it's through individuals like yourself that take the time to share their stories. So thank you.
Cool. It's been really fun having the conversation, and I'm sure we could talk for another hour and a half.
Yeah, no, 100%. We're going to have you on the show again. I didn't dive as much into, a lot of the science behind everything. I love, for me, I love it. Like, let's get in and let's talk about mitochondria and what's happening in relationship to, foods and these medications and so on. But we can definitely have you back on the show where we can, just take people further in so that they can understand their bodies more and how their bodies work. And then also just diving more into like, what do some of these meals look like? But until then, everyone who's listening, please, Brendan, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so the easiest place is just at our website, wellnessgarage.ca. So you'll see all our programs there, and you can get in touch with us and learn more about our what we do. We're on Facebook, Wellness Garage, and we're also on Twitter. And I'm personally on Twitter at Byrne. So you can follow me.
We'll put all of that in the show notes. Now, if somebody is not based in Canada, we have a lot of listeners that are international. Can they also work with you?
Yeah, so we do when we're working with people outside of the country, or really outside of BC, that want to work with me directly. I'll do something called medical coaching. So we just have an agreement where I'm not providing the primary care or the medical information, but I'm really coaching you around the lifestyle behaviors. And so I've done that with a whole number of people, kind of from all over. And it's super effective. Usually what happens is they've got a doc that's more than happy to kind of, make the adjustments to meds or order labs, and really just kind of helping people apply the strategy. So that's an option as well. And so if you do want to work with me that way, as you contact us, just let us know, and we can kind of set that up as well.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, I look forward to just watching your progress and, all of the amazing programs. You have an incredible site, lots of brilliant resources. I have to thank you for, consolidating all of that and making it available to so many people, especially in this world where everybody's marketing something or the other. I mean, and you are just providing it, like you said, for free, which is awesome. So please head over to the Wellness Garage website and check out all those incredible resources, and also share those resources with your physicians, because your physicians might not have heard that, about lifestyle medicine. They might not yet have heard about functional medicine. They might not know that chronic diseases can be reversed. And, by starting at the Wellness Garage, it's a very good deep dive into all of that incredible knowledge that's going to save lots of people's lives. So thanks for doing all of that.
All right. Thanks, Nicolette.
Amazing.
Hi, everyone. As promised, another great show on our Eat Real to Heal podcast. Please share this with others and get on our mailing list over at richerhealth.ca and at nicolettericher.com, because you want to know about all of the incredible offerings we have coming up in 2021 and 2022. We are about to launch all new programs that are so exciting and that are proven to get you results in reversing your chronic diseases, in achieving your optimum health, in helping you realize your true peak potential so that you can accomplish anything and everything that you want to accomplish in your life. But first, we got to get those chronic diseases under control and reversed and eliminated so that you can be liberated from the pain of your illness, from the lethargy, from and all the other emotions and feelings, physical, spiritual, and mental, emotional, that come with having a chronic disease. So that's what we're about at Eat Real to Heal and the podcast and Richer Health, and everything we do with all our other companies. So thanks for being with us, and stay tuned for the next episode on our show. Bye, everyone.